Carla woke up early that morning, determined to make her daughter's birthday a peaceful occasion. She set the table with a simple cake, some colorful fruit, and just a few delicate decorations. Everything was planned so it wouldn't overwhelm her daughter's senses. She'd always had strong reactions to loud noises and sudden movements. The atmosphere was calm, lit by the natural light coming through the light-colored curtains. Every little detail showed quiet love and care. As she arranged the plates, Carla thought about the traditional birthday parties she'd seen in other families. Balloons popping, loud music, and candles that made everyone scream with excitement. But for her daughter, that wouldn't be a celebration. It would be torture. That's why she was turning those traditions into something new, something that worked for her child. That cake with no candles was a symbol of protection and respect. In the quiet of the living room, Carla felt a sense of pride. A lot of people didn't get her choices, but she knew how much her daughter needed a safe space. Her shy little girl was in her room, playing quietly with her building blocks. The soft sound of the pieces clicking together was comforting, like their own private soundtrack. Carla smiled, thinking about the moment they would soon share. Still, she couldn't shake her anxiety. She knew that in a little while family would start arriving, and with them would come looks and comments. She'd heard so many times that she needed to teach her daughter to handle the real world. But to Carla, that just sounded cruel. The world didn't always have to be harsh. She picked up a blue napkin and folded it carefully, like you'd fold a prayer. The party would be small, but full of meaning. The soft colors gave off a feeling of peace, and everything on the table seemed chosen to help everyone stay calm. Carla took a deep breath, repeating to herself, "Today will be a happy day, even if they don't understand." Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Carla's husband came in with a quiet smile, carrying a small juice box for her daughter. He supported her in everything, even if he was more reserved when it came to dealing with the family. To Carla, his partnership was a relief. Together, they felt like a shield around their little girl. A little later, the doorbell rang. Carla's heart beat faster. She knew the party hadn't even really started yet, but the real challenge was about to walk through the door. She took a deep breath before answering, reminding herself that more than anything, she wanted to protect her daughter. On the other side were the grandparents, holding brightly wrapped presents. Their excitement was clear, though they barely hid how thrown they were by how simple everything was. Her father-in-law muttered something about missing real parties, and Carla could already feel the weight of their judgment. Even so, she kept smiling. Her daughter came out shyly into the hallway, drawn by the presents. Her eyes lit up with curiosity, but she stayed close to her mom, cautious. Carla bent down, held her hand, and made her feel safe. "It's your day, sweetie," she said softly, and the little girl leaned into her arm. The morning continued with light conversation, but Carla could sense the underlying tension. Every laugh from the grandparents came with an indirect comparison to past parties. She knew the calm was just a prelude to what was still to come. If you also believe that every child deserves to be loved and respected for who they are, subscribe to the channel and follow more touching stories like this one. Then it was time for the cake. Carla placed it on the table gently. It was simple, covered with a thin layer of white frosting and a few red berries on top. The family gathered around, curious, expecting the traditional candle lighting ritual. The curious silence was broken by the grandfather. "So, where are the candles?" Carla took a deep breath, having anticipated this. She calmly explained that there wouldn't be any candles, because the smoke and the collective singing scared her daughter. She said this moment was just about sharing the cake peacefully. But instead of understanding, she was met with confused and disappointed looks. Some whispered among themselves, as if changing traditions was outrageous. Her daughter, unaware of the tension, looked at the cake with quiet fascination. Her fingers moved slightly, as if she wanted to touch the colorful berries. Carla smiled, seeing her so interested, but the room around them was filling with judgment. The grandfather insisted, "Every child needs to learn, otherwise she'll never get used to it." At that moment, Carla felt her heart sink. She didn't want to argue, but she knew every word was an attempt to invalidate all the effort she had made. She thought about just ignoring it, but her daughter needed an advocate. So, in a firm voice, she replied that the most important thing was seeing her daughter happy, not following social rules. Her grandmother let out a loud, disapproving sigh. To her, birthdays without the happy birthday song weren't real birthdays. Some family members exchanged looks and shook their heads. Carla, however, remained standing beside her daughter like a protective wall. There still weren't any direct confrontations, but the tension was growing like a storm cloud. Her daughter picked a berry from the cake and smiled slightly, a simple gesture that to Carla was worth more than any traditional ritual. Her husband, quiet, started serving the slices, trying to lighten the mood, but the disapproving looks continued to hang in the air, as if every slice served was an affront to normality. Carla knew this was just the first battle of the afternoon. Her choice to remove the candles had become a symbol of resistance, and the family didn't seem willing to accept it. The cake, which was supposed to bring people together, now marked an invisible divide between two different ways of loving and raising a child. As she cut the slices, Carla noticed her niece watching impatiently. The girl stared intently at the cake, like someone waiting for her turn to shine. The apparent calm was hiding a whirlwind about to erupt. Carla tried to focus on her daughter, who was eating her slice of cake with a sweet, peaceful smile. For a moment, she forgot the weight of everyone's disapproval and fixed her attention solely on the child's simple joy. But she knew that peace would be short-lived. The chapter of the cake without candles was over, but another, louder one was about to begin, and Carla could already feel the warning signs of the conflict approaching like an unavoidable storm. The doorbell rang again, and her niece came running into the living room with the energy of a whirlwind. She was wearing a sparkly dress and holding a noisy toy, which she immediately started activating over and over. Her voice echoed through the house, shattering the serenity Carla had so carefully built. All eyes turned to the girl, as they always did. After giving her grandparents an exaggerated hug, the girl had everyone's attention. They laughed at her antics, praised her outgoing nature, and commented loudly on how smart she was getting. Carla watched in silence, trying not to let her annoyance show. Her own daughter, withdrawing, sought refuge behind her mother, shrinking away from the noise. While the niece paraded her energy around the room, the birthday girl remained almost invisible. It was as if her presence was overshadowed by her cousin Sparkle, who monopolized the space with loud laughs and big gestures. Carla felt a pang of hurt, but she stayed calm, determined not to turn the day into a confrontation. The grandparents, enchanted, remarked on how the niece could liven up any party. The comment felt like an indirect criticism, suggesting that the calm atmosphere Carla had chosen was too cold. The mother took a deep breath, reminding herself she was there to protect her daughter, not to please everyone else. Still, the comparisons were inevitable. The autistic girl watched her cousin from a distance, subtly flapping her hands in a sign of discomfort. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, avoiding the whirlwind of stimulation the niece was creating. Carla knelt beside her and whispered words of reassurance, reminding her she was safe. Meanwhile, the niece had taken over the living room. She pulled at presents, opened packages that weren't even hers, and laughed loudly as she showed off each new item. The adults, far from scolding her, were fawning over her with applause. To Carla, it all felt like a cruel mirror. One child celebrated as the perfect one, while her own daughter was treated as if she were invisible. Carla's husband came over quietly and put his hand on her shoulder. It was his silent way of saying he saw the imbalance too. She drew strength from that gesture, steeling herself to stay firm. She knew the real battle hadn't even started yet. The restless niece soon fixed her eyes on the cake. She asked loudly about the candles, pulling everyone's attention back to it. Carla patiently explained, once again, that there wouldn't be any. But this time, the child's insistence seemed to carry a different intention.
The niece's eyes narrowed in frustration. To her, a party without the birthday song and candles was just unacceptable. Her expectation to be the center of attention seemed threatened, and her body already showed signs of impatience. Carla realized she was about to deal with an emotional whirlwind. At that moment, the room felt like a stage about to collapse. Between the serenity Carla was fighting to maintain and the niece's chaotic energy, there was a growing divide. The atmosphere was charged, like that held breath right before a storm breaks. Sitting at the edge of the table, the niece crossed her arms and announced loudly, "I want to sing Happy Birthday!" Her declaration sounded like a command, cutting off all other conversation. All eyes turned to Carla, waiting for her reaction. The mother's heart raced, knowing this was the point of no return. Carla explained once more, calmly, that there would be no happy birthday song and no candles. Her daughter couldn't handle the collective noise and would get scared. But the niece insisted, standing up with tears welling in her eyes. "It's a birthday! You have to sing!" she yelled, as if tradition were an unbreakable rule. The grandparents tried to intervene, siding with the noisy granddaughter. They said she was right, that a party wasn't any fun without the song. Their words felt like a direct judgment against Carla. The mother stood her ground, even as she felt the weight of being alone against everyone. The birthday girl, hearing the growing commotion, started rocking back and forth, a clear sign of distress. Her eyes sought the floor, and her hands flapped nervously. Carla saw her daughter's anguish and hugged her, as if trying to shield her from the pressure all around them. The niece, now standing on a chair, started singing by herself. Her loud voice echoed through the room, accompanied by the grandparents' improvised clapping. The shrill sound made the autistic girl cover her ears and shrink into her mother's arms, crying softly. The moment was descending into chaos. Carla raised her voice for the first time, asking them to stop. She said she wouldn't allow her daughter to be exposed to something so painful. But instead of support, she received disapproving looks. To the others, she was the one ruining the party. Carla's heart broke at the scene. The niece, frustrated, started screaming even louder. She was crying because she couldn't blow out candles that didn't even exist. Her tantrum now dominated the room, and everyone rushed to console her as if she were the victim. Meanwhile, the birthday girl was forgotten, trembling with fear. Carla's husband tried to intervene, asking for calm, but his voice was lost in the tumult. Carla felt suffocated, as if she were fighting a tide determined to drown the peace she had so carefully planned. The contrast between the two children was cruel and painful. The celebratory atmosphere had turned into a battlefield. With every cry from the niece, Carla watched her own daughter suffer in silence, as if the world was screaming that the perfect little girl deserved more attention than the daughter who just needed understanding. At that moment, Carla realized the conflict wasn't just about singing Happy Birthday. It was about who had the right to be seen, respected, and truly loved. And her response was about to be tested in front of everyone. The niece's crying erupted like thunder, echoing through the house. She stomped her feet on the floor, screamed, and demanded that someone put candles on the cake immediately. With every shrill word, Carla's daughter shrank back further, hiding her face in her mother's arms. The contrast between the racket and the pained silence was overwhelming.
The grandparents rushed to comfort the noisy granddaughter, just like they always did. They used sweet words, promised her gifts, and cradled her as if she were the birthday girl. Carla watched the scene with a lump in her throat, feeling the injustice of seeing her own daughter ignored on her birthday. Resentment grew in her chest. While everyone crowded around the niece, the birthday girl trembled, trying to cover her ears. Carla held her tight, trying to convey safety, but she felt powerless against the disorder. The cake, which was supposed to symbolize joy, had become a witness to a cruel spectacle. The living room seemed split into two worlds. On one side, the niece was the center of attention. On the other, her own daughter was invisible, swallowed up by her own sensitivity. Carla knew this moment would be etched in their memories as a bitter one, and that cut her deeply. Trying to regain control, Carla asked for quiet again. Her firm voice cut through the screams and sobs. For a moment there was a pause. But then the grandmother accused, "You're making too big a deal out of this. Children need to learn to deal with these things." The words cut like a knife. Her husband tried to support her, asking for calm, but his effort was drowned out by the chorus of subtle criticisms. Everyone was talking at once, defending the niece and downplaying the birthday girl's pain. Carla felt cornered, as if she were in an unfair trial. The niece, realizing she had everyone's full attention, turned the outburst up even further. She jumped, clapped her hands, and shouted. The noise made Carla's daughter cry softly, almost inaudibly. Her suffering went unnoticed by most, but to her mother, it was deafening. Carla closed her eyes for a moment, trying to stay strong. She wished she could just take her daughter and leave, but she knew running away wouldn't solve anything. She had to face this scene, even though it was painful. After all, protecting her daughter also meant facing the misunderstanding of others. The cake sat untouched on the table, a symbol of a party that was no longer a celebration. What should have been sweet had turned into a collective bitterness. Carla felt the birthday had lost its lightness before it had even really begun. Right then, something inside her shifted. It wasn't about candles or a song anymore. It was about the choice between staying silent to keep the peace or standing up to protect her child. And Carla knew she couldn't stay quiet any longer.
With her daughter still crying in her arms, Carla raised her voice for the first time, clear and decisive. She asked everyone to stop, to respect the birthday girl's boundaries. Her words cut through the room, briefly interrupting the tumult. The silence that followed was thick with tension. The grandparents looked at her with immediate disapproval. "You're depriving your daughter of living in the real world," her grandfather accused. "Children need to deal with noise or they'll never learn to adapt." The words were harsh and cut like invisible knives. Carla took a deep breath before answering. "This isn't about deprivation, it's about respect," she said, her voice steady. She explained that her daughter didn't need to be forced to suffer just to please tradition. But her words found no sympathy. Instead, they generated indignant looks and disapproving whispers. The niece, calmer now, was still being comforted as if she were the victim of an injustice. The grandparents hugged her and said that at their house things would be different. Carla swallowed her anger, feeling like she was being treated as an intruder in her own home. Her daughter, still frightened, hid her face against her mother's chest. Carla stroked her hair, trying to project safety, but she felt the growing pressure from the family against her. Her husband, though supportive, remained silent, perhaps afraid of making things even more tense. The criticisms began to pile up. An aunt commented that Carla took everything too far. A cousin said it was unfair to ruin the party over a silly issue.
Each word weighed heavier, like stones being thrown at her resolve. Carla looked at all of them, her gaze firm and her voice thick with emotion, and said, "You all talk about the party, but you're forgetting the birthday girl. Who here actually cares about what she feels?" The question hung in the air like an unexpected blow. No one answered. For a few seconds, there was only silence, broken by the sound of the little girl's trembling breath. Carla realized that even without support, her voice had hit at the heart of the matter. It wasn't about candles anymore. It was about dignity. The looks in the room, however, soon hardened again. The grandmother muttered that Carla didn't know how to raise children and that she needed to be stricter. The hostility was now explicit, and the mother felt more and more isolated. Even so, amid the weight of their judgment, Carla found a spark of strength. Holding her daughter in her arms reminded her why she was fighting. In that moment, she decided that, even if she was alone, she would face them all if she had to. The conversations began to turn into thinly veiled attacks. One aunt remarked loudly about how the niece was so cheerful and spontaneous, suggesting that was the right way for a child to be. Another relative added that the autistic girl never participated in anything and that Carla was her fault. Every sentence felt like a stab wound. Carla stayed quiet for a few moments, feeling crushed by the weight of the comparisons. The niece, laughing again, was running around the living room showing off her toys. She was being treated as the star of the party, while the birthday girl remained curled up in her mother's arms, invisible to almost everyone. The grandparents didn't hold back on their praise for the noisy granddaughter. "She's going places. She's so full of energy," they exclaimed. And in the same tone, they would glance sideways at Carla's daughter, as if to make the difference perfectly clear. The favoritism was overflowing, and Carla no longer knew if it hurt more for her daughter's sake or for her own. Her husband tried to change the subject, offering more cake and pouring juice, but the comments kept coming, piercing the atmosphere like needles. Carla could feel her patience wearing thin, getting closer and closer to breaking point. Yet she knew that if she lost her composure, it would just confirm their view that she was too dramatic. The birthday girl, hearing her cousin's shrill laughter, started rocking her body again. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, her fingers moving in a nervous, repetitive motion. Carla noticed the signs and stroked her hair, trying to soothe her. But the pain of seeing her daughter constantly compared to the other child was unbearable. An older cousin, perhaps without meaning any harm, commented, "Why isn't she more like the other one? Kids need to play, run, laugh." The remark hung in the air like a verdict, as if there were only one valid way to be a child. Carla swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. The niece, sensing the approving looks, turned up the charm. She sang loudly, made funny faces, and received enthusiastic applause. To Carla, every laugh felt like a cruel reminder of her own daughter's isolation. The favoritism was so obvious it was painful. Carla felt the environment was pushing her into a position of weakness, but amid the pain, a conviction was also growing. She would not allow her daughter to be made to feel less than. She might be different, but that didn't make her any less deserving of love and respect. The cake remained almost untouched, a reminder to everyone that this was still a birthday. But instead of celebration, an atmosphere of judgment ruled. With every comparison, Carla wondered how her daughter would remember this day in the future. Determined, she promised herself she would do whatever she could to make this memory bearable. She wouldn't let only the cruel words define the memory of this birthday. There was still time to fight for her daughter's dignity. After so many comparisons, the girl couldn't take it anymore and got up by herself and walked to her room.
Her steps were small and hesitant, as if she were fleeing from an invisible storm. Carla followed close behind, her heart aching as she realized the party itself was driving the birthday girl away from her own celebration. In the room, the girl sat in the corner, hugging her knees. Her eyes avoided contact, and her body rocked rhythmically. To Carla, it was a silent plea for refuge, a gesture of self-protection in the face of so much noise and hostility. She knelt beside her daughter and wrapped her in her arms.
The voices from the living room still echoed in the background, loud and full of laughter that seemed to mock their silent pain. Carla tried to close the door, creating the barrier against that world. Inside the bedroom, the atmosphere grew calmer, but the sadness remained. Her husband came in soon after, bringing the slice of cake. He tried to lighten the mood, offering the dessert as a gesture of affection. The little girl slowly took a forkful, and a small smile appeared, though it was timid. To Carla, that simple gesture was worth more than any loud party. But the peace was fragile. From the hallway, critical voices continued to echo. "See? She even isolated herself. A child like that will never learn to adapt." Each comment pierced through the wall like invisible arrows. Carla felt crushed, knowing the judgment wouldn't end anytime soon. She looked at her daughter, who remained quiet, focused only on the cake. Her small hands held the plate carefully, as if it were her shield. Carla wished she could freeze that moment, protect her forever inside that bubble of calm. But the world kept intruding. Knocks on the door called Carla back to reality. A voice demanded they return to the living room, saying it was rude to abandon the party. Carla hesitated, torn between protecting her daughter and giving in to the pressure. Her husband, seeing her anguish, offered to deal with the relatives. "Stay here with her," he said calmly. It was a temporary relief, but Carla knew she couldn't hide forever. Sooner or later, she would have to face the judgment head-on. As she stroked her daughter's hair, Carla thought about what it really meant to protect her. Maybe it wasn't just about keeping her away from the noise, but about teaching the world to respect her boundaries. It was an uphill battle, but one that needed to be fought. And in the quiet of the bedroom, she found her resolve. If no one else would stand up for her daughter, she would do it alone, even against the whole family. Her daughter's silence was transforming into strength for the mother. Sitting beside her daughter, Carla was lost in turbulent thoughts. She wondered if she was really doing the right thing by being so protective. The family's criticisms echoed in her mind like an insistent chorus. She needs to learn to deal with the real world. It was impossible not to doubt herself. She remembered previous times when she had also avoided certain situations to protect her daughter. School events, trips to the mall, birthday party invitations. In every instance, she had chosen to spare the girl from distress. Now she wondered if the world saw that as love or as a weakness. Her husband tried to comfort her, saying there was nothing wrong with caring, but the pressure from outside voices was stronger than his intimate consolation. Carla felt alone, as if the entire responsibility for her daughter's future rested on her shoulders. A silent battle, but a heavy one.
As she stroked the girl's hair, she thought about what normal really meant. To her family, normal was shouting, "Happy birthday!" blowing out candles and laughing loudly. To her daughter, normal was playing quietly, smiling softly, and feeling secure in a cozy embrace. Two worlds that seemed impossible to reconcile. Carla's tears fell silently. She didn't want her daughter to grow up believing she was less just because she didn't fit other people's expectations. The greatest pain wasn't dealing with the noise, but dealing with the judgment that her daughter wasn't good enough. Memories from her own childhood surfaced in her mind. She remembered how she had always tried to please others, even at her own expense. Now, facing her daughter, she felt she had to break that cycle. She wouldn't let the girl be molded to please people who didn't respect her. The cake on her daughter's plate was almost finished, and her small smile brought a breath of peace. Carla thought, maybe the problem wasn't her daughter,
but the world around them that refused to change. This realization made her wipe her tears and lift her head. On the other side of the door, the voices were still arguing. It was like a court in recess, ready to resume the trial the moment she appeared. Carla knew she couldn't avoid the confrontation. The real test was still to come, and she would need courage to face it. She looked at her daughter, who was now playing quietly with one of the gifts. She saw in her the innocence of someone who didn't understand the hostility around them. It was her mission to protect that innocence for as long as possible without letting it be crushed by the weight of expectations. And so, between bitter reflections and growing determination, Carla decided she wouldn't back down. If the family wanted to make her a target, she would become a wall. Her love for her daughter was greater than any tradition. When she returned to the living room, Carla was met with heavy stares. The relatives were gathered as if forming a jury. The grandfather was the first to speak, saying he didn't understand why a simple birthday party had to be so complicated. His words sounded like a direct accusation. Others quickly joined in. "You make everything difficult," an aunt said. "You're ruining the moment for everyone," a cousin added. Each phrase felt like a verdict, reinforcing the idea that Carla was to blame for the tense atmosphere. She tried to explain that she was just respecting her daughter's boundaries, but her voice was drowned out by constant interruptions. Every argument she made was met with scorn or sarcasm. It was like speaking in a courtroom where the guilty verdict had been decided before the trial even began. Her husband intervened, asking for calm, but he was ignored. Everyone seemed determined to make Carla the villain of the occasion. The niece, having recovered, was happily playing on her grandmother's lap as if she were the real birthday girl. The favoritism was blatant.
Carla looked at her daughter, who was still partially hidden behind her. It was painful to realize that, even though it was her birthday, the girl was being treated like a background character. The child's quiet nature was being used as proof that she didn't know how to have fun. Her grandfather raised his voice, stating that Carla was condemning her daughter to a life of isolation. "You can't protect her from the world forever," he said harshly. The words landed like a judge's gavel, sealing the collective accusation against her. Carla took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. She could feel her anger simmering, but she knew she had to choose her words carefully. If she lost her temper, it would just confirm the family's image of her as being excessive and dramatic. She needed to speak with clarity and conviction. She stood up and said she would no longer listen to anyone call her daughter a problem. The real problem, she declared, was the family's inability to respect differences. Her firm voice cut through the air like an unexpected blade, surprising everyone. The silence that followed was heavy, as if no one had anticipated that reaction. For a few seconds, Carla felt she had regained control of the situation. But she also knew this battle was far from over. In this family tribunal, she had made one thing clear. It was no longer about candles. It was about dignity. And even if she stood alone, she was ready to fight for her daughter until the end. The heavy silence still hung in the air when a soft voice rose from the table. It was Carla's younger sister, who had been quiet until now, just observing everything. She said she understood what Carla was trying to do, and that she would do the same in her place. Her words felt like a breath of fresh air in the middle of all the suffocating tension. Everyone turned, surprised, to look at the birthday girl's aunt. Known for avoiding conflict, she rarely took sides in family arguments. But now, with a firm expression, she said she too had noticed how the family always favored the niece and ignored the little girl who needed the most care. The grandmother tried to interrupt, indignant, but the aunt continued. She recalled past family gatherings where Carla's daughter had been left out. She mentioned specific small incidents, like times the niece received all the praise, while the autistic girl was treated as if she were invisible. Her honesty shocked everyone. Carla looked at her sister with silent gratitude.
For the first time that afternoon, she felt less alone. It was as if a crack had opened in the wall of criticism, allowing a new perspective to be heard. The mother's heart filled with hope.
Some relatives shook their heads in denial. They said it was an exaggeration, that they had always treated both children the same. But the memories the aunt had shared were so specific that their argument sounded hollow. The discomfort in the room was obvious.
The niece, not fully understanding, frowned. Perhaps for the first time, she was realizing that her position as the center of attention wasn't unquestionable. The child's confused expression contrasted with Carla's, who now held her daughter more tightly, as if strengthened by the support she'd received. Carla's husband, who had remained quiet until then, also spoke up. He said he knew how hard his wife fought every day to give their daughter a dignified life. His words were simple, but carried real weight, reinforcing the legitimacy of Carla's struggle. For a few minutes, the atmosphere shifted. There was less hostility and more reflection. The tribunal was no longer united against Carla, and that alone felt like a victory. The weight on her shoulders seemed a little lighter. Even so, the tension hadn't completely disappeared. The grandparents remained firm in their position, determined to defend the niece as the ideal example. But now, Carla had allies, and that changed everything. In that moment, she realized she didn't need to face this battle completely alone. Even a spark of support was enough to fuel her courage. With the atmosphere less hostile, Carla took a deep breath. She knew she still needed to make a final decision. Either she could back down, giving in to the family's pressure, or she could stand her ground, even at the risk of damaging important relationships. There was no more room for half measures. She looked at her daughter, who remained calm beside her, holding her hand tightly. In that small gesture, Carla found her answer. The girl didn't need candles, songs, or forced traditions. She only needed safety, love, and respect. The family's eyes fixed on her again, waiting for her choice. The silence became suffocating, as if everyone was waiting for a final verdict. Carla felt her heart racing, but also a growing strength in her chest. She thought about her daughter's future, about how every decision she made today would shape how the girl saw herself tomorrow. If she gave in now, she would be teaching her daughter that her pain didn't matter. If she stood firm, she would show her that her well-being came before any social convention. She stood up calmly and said in a firm voice, "If you can't respect my daughter, then you won't be part of her moments. I'd rather have a small, peaceful party than watch her suffer just to satisfy traditions." Her words cut through the air like a sharp blade. The grandparents' eyes widened, surprised by her boldness. Some relatives murmured in disapproval, while others remained in thoughtful silence. Carla knew she had crossed a line, but she didn't regret it. Her husband looked at her with pride, recognizing the courage she had mustered. Her younger sister gave a slight, supportive nod. For the first time that afternoon, Carla felt she was in control of the situation.
Her daughter, unaware of the weight of the decision, simply offered a timid smile, feeling protected. That smile was the fuel Carla needed to stand her ground, even in the face of their hostility. Love was speaking louder than any tradition. But the battle wasn't over. The silence that followed was filled with resentment, and Carla knew there would be consequences. What was at stake wasn't just a birthday party, but the entire family dynamic from that point forward. Nevertheless, in that moment, she had already chosen her side, and that side would always be her daughter's, even if the price was distance from part of the family. The room fell silent after Carla's declaration, but soon voices rose again. The grandmother, indignant, said Carla was putting up unnecessary barriers. The grandfather insisted that her attitude was selfishness disguised as care. The words were sharp, but Carla no longer flinched. With steady steps, she stood up and looked each person in the eye. Her voice didn't waver as she said, "My daughter is not a problem. The problem is your lack of respect. I will not stand by and let you make her feel less than anyone else." The statement landed like a hammer, reverberating through the room. The grandparents tried to argue back, but Carla continued. She explained that every child has their own needs, and that ignoring them was cruelty, not tradition. She said if the family truly loved her daughter, they should learn to respect her boundaries. Otherwise, they wouldn't be missed at her celebrations. The niece, not fully understanding, watched everything in silence. For the first time, she seemed to realize she wasn't the center of the party. The child's confused look contrasted with the firmness of the protective mother who stood tall against the storm. Some relatives looked away, embarrassed. Others whispered, but without the same confidence as before. Carla's voice had shaken their certainty in judging her. For the first time, her voice seemed to carry weight. Her husband, who had been quiet until now, stood up and positioned himself beside her. His presence reinforced the message. It wasn't just Carla against everyone, but a couple united in protecting their daughter. That simple gesture gave even more authority to her words. Her younger sister, emotional, added, "We don't have to repeat traditions that hurt people. We can learn to celebrate in other ways." This unexpected support further broke the unanimous criticism. The atmosphere became less hostile, though still charged with tension. Carla took a deep breath, holding her ground. Her steady gaze conveyed the certainty of someone who would not back down. She knew she was drawing a definitive line with her family, but she also knew her daughter's dignity was worth more than anyone's approval. The grandparents, unable to control the situation, retreated to the couch, muttering about how everything had changed. Their tone was no longer attacking, but carried a hint of defeat. The battle hadn't been easy, but Carla had won her space.
In that moment, she realized it wasn't just a party at stake. It was the future of how her daughter would be seen, respected, and remembered. And in front of everyone, she had chosen to be the voice that would never allow her daughter to be silenced. After the confrontation, the party continued in uncomfortable silence. The guests ate their cake without the same forced cheer as before. Some avoided looking at Carla. Others whispered in low tones, but no one dared to challenge her directly again. The atmosphere was heavy, but it also revealed a certain newfound respect. The grandparents, resentful, kept to themselves in conversation, ignoring much of what was happening. The niece went back to playing, but without her earlier star-like aura. The attention that at once surrounded her seemed scattered, weakened by the impact of Carla's words. Some relatives began to reflect. One aunt commented quietly that maybe you really didn't need to sing Happy Birthday to have a party. A cousin said he'd never thought about how the birthday girl felt during those moments. Small cracks were appearing in the wall of criticism. Carla, though exhausted, felt a quiet sense of relief. She had faced them all and set clear boundaries. Even if part of the family now saw her as the villain, she knew she had defended her daughter firmly. The price was high, but the value was beyond measure. Under the table, her husband held her hand, offering silent support. The gesture was small, but it carried immense strength. Carla knew that even facing the disapproval of others, she had by her side the people who truly mattered. Her daughter, calmer now, began to smile timidly again. She played with a gift on the floor, unaware of the tensions. To Carla, that smile was proof she had made the right decision. Her daughter's love was the greatest recognition she could ever receive. Still, the pain of the division was real. She knew that from now on, family gatherings would never be the same. There would be distance, resentment, and perhaps even permanent breaks. But deep down, Carla accepted these consequences. She reflected on how the family, so attached to tradition, had turned a simple birthday into a battlefield. But she also understood that sometimes it's in these clashes that the true strength of love is revealed. Her younger sister came over and said softly, "You did what no one else would have had the courage to do." Carla smiled faintly, feeling validated. It didn't erase the pain, but it made the fight feel less lonely. As evening approached and the guests began to say their goodbyes, Carla knew something had changed forever. The party was over, but the marks of that day would be etched in everyone's memory, especially in hers.
When the last door closed and silence finally settled over the house, Carla felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The living room, once full of voices, now seemed to breathe calm. The leftover cake on the table and the gifts scattered on the floor were the only traces of the turbulent party. Carla sat down on the couch, exhausted. Her husband was quietly gathering the dishes, respecting the moment. Her younger sister had said goodbye with a long hug, promising to be there for her from now on. Even with the losses, she had gained something precious, the certainty that she wasn't completely alone. Her daughter approached, still shy, her steps slow. In her hands, she carried her favorite new toy and looked at her mother with serene eyes. Without saying a word, she climbed into a lap and rested her head against her chest. Carla wrapped her arms around the girl and closed her eyes. The silence of that hug said more than any speech ever could. It was as if her daughter, in her own way, was thanking her for being protected. In that simple gesture, Carla found all the answers she had been searching for. Her husband joined them, sitting beside her and putting his arm around them. For a moment, the three of them formed an intimate circle, a small fortress against the world. There were no more criticisms, comparisons, or imposed traditions, just the essence of a family that chose each other every single day. Carla looked at her daughter and noticed a detail that moved her deeply. A slight but genuine smile lit up the girl's face. It wasn't a forced smile, nor was it the result of applause. It was pure, born from the comfort of feeling safe. Tears came, but this time they were tears of relief. Carla understood that although she had lost part of her family, she had gained something much greater: her daughter's trust and the certainty that she was on the right path. The price was worth paying. In that moment, the cake without candles stopped being a symbol of absence. It became proof of resistance and love, a reminder that traditions can change when they stop serving the people they're meant to celebrate. Carla promised herself she would never stop fighting. She knew other battles would come, at school, in society, even within her own family. But she also knew she had the strength to face them. After all, every smile from her daughter would be her victory. And as she looked into her daughter's eyes that night, Carla found confirmation of everything. Protecting her daughter was more important than pleasing the whole world. Because in the end, true happiness resided in that very gaze. Carla faced her own family to protect her daughter. How far would you go for the love of the one who matters most? If this story touched your heart, subscribe now so you don't miss any of the ones to come.